At 50, Errol Flynn finally spoke their names, the men he loved in secret. 50 years of running, 50 years of rumors, 50 years of being Hollywood's perfect man. And now, in a rain-soaked cabin overlooking Vancouver Harbor, it was ending. October 14th, 1959. Errol Flynn sat hunched over a wooden table, breath shallow, hands trembling. The same hands that once swung swords and seduced America. Tonight, those hands could barely lift a leather-bound notebook. Cracked cover, worn edges. It looked less like a diary and more like a confession. Flynn opened it slowly. 8 names, each written in fading ink, each crossed out, rewritten, crossed out again. As if the man holding the pen had spent half his life fighting the truth they represented. He stared at the list, then whispered, barely audible, "I should have spoken these names long ago." His eyes closed. A breath. Fear or relief. For decades, Hollywood worshipped Errol Flynn as a god, the ultimate seducer, the swashbuckling hero who conquered every woman he met. But there was another story. Buried, suffocated, locked inside that notebook. Flynn lifted it closer to the lamplight, his lips parted. These were the men who mattered. Wind slammed the window open. The flame flickered. The room went cold. For the first time, Errol Flynn stopped performing. At 50, broken, abandoned, finally unmasked, he was ready to tell the truth he'd carried alone through fame, scandal, and silence. 8 names, 8 secrets, 8 ghosts from Hollywood's golden age. Who were they? And why did Errol Flynn fear their names more than anything he faced on screen? Part 2. The Golden Cage, Hollywood, 1935. A place paved with gold, but built on shadows. A factory that manufactured legends and buried them with whispers. Errol Flynn arrived like a storm, too handsome, too wild, too magnetic. The moment he leapt from mast to deck in Captain Blood, America crowned him king, the embodiment of pure masculinity, a face almost unreal, a body carved from marble, a laugh that could charm nations. Flynn didn't play the role of the real man, he defined it. But creating icons requires building cages. Hollywood didn't just control careers, it controlled lives. Your dates, your lovers, your conversations, your very breath. And it demanded perfection. More importantly, it demanded lies. Because one rumor about sexuality could destroy everything: contracts, future, spirit. Flynn knew this intimately. Hollywood needed him to be a womanizer, a dangerous charmer, a laughing rogue, a Robin Hood stealing hearts with a glance. So Flynn embraced the performance. He drowned himself in alcohol, cocaine, yachts, midnight parties, fleeting affairs, desperately trying to prove something to a world that never knew him. But behind every drunken smile, every conquest, every scandal, was a truth he couldn't touch, a truth he feared, a truth Hollywood would never forgive. So he ran, into women's eyes, into ocean darkness, into spotlights and courtrooms, into the very scandals he built, anything to keep truth at bay. But the more he ran, the faster he unraveled. By the early 1940s, Flynn was collapsing from within. His body aged faster than his years. Alcohol became breakfast, morphine became nightfall. Yet nothing broke him as deeply as the loneliness no one saw. The loneliness of carrying too many secrets. During interviews, Flynn played perfectly, smiling, joking, pretending freedom. But when doors closed, when cigarette smoke curled around fading lamps, Flynn sat alone for hours, staring at the sea like a man exiled from his own life. Rumors grew heavier. Charles Hyam wrote of him as a man with no boundaries. David Brett claimed Flynn tried everything. Hollywood whispered about nights filled with more than women. They speculated, fantasized, built stories on shadows. But none knew the truth. Only Flynn knew, and only 8 names in that leather notebook knew it with him. Fear, shame, desire, unspoken affection, love without a name, all twisted into a knot around Flynn's heart, dragging him downward like an anchor tied to a drowning soul. If Errol Flynn ever loved men, if even a sliver of rumors held truth, it was something he believed he'd take to his grave. But he didn't. Because this story begins with the first name, the first man in the notebook, Ross Alexander. Chapter 1. Ross Alexander, the first man he couldn't forget. Before scandals, before yachts, before trials and headlines, there was a boy from Tasmania trying to survive in a world too big for him. And another boy, just as lost, ambitious, beautifully fragile, named Ross Alexander. They met in 1935 on the set of Captain Blood. Flynn was uncertain, insecure, still trying to understand who he was supposed to be. Ross Alexander was already a rising Warner Brothers star, handsome, bright-eyed, charismatic, but carrying sadness no one understood. Their connection was immediate, not dramatic, not scandalous. Something quieter, born from shared fear of failure, exposure, being swallowed by Hollywood's appetite. They spent long nights in dressing rooms, talking in low voices while crew packed up. Ross complained about fame's pressure. Flynn confessed feeling like an imposter. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, they just stayed. Because staying was easier than facing the world outside. Rumors say the relationship deepened, not into a love story Hollywood could print, but into something tender, complicated, unspoken. Biographers whispered, Alexander may have been Flynn's first true American affection, a connection intertwined with admiration, loneliness, and confusing freedom before the world forces you into roles. But Hollywood was merciless. Ross Alexander struggled with depression, debt, pressure to maintain a life that wasn't his. He spiraled quietly, drinking too much, working too little, wearing smiles that convinced no one. January 1937. Ross Alexander walked into his garage, closed the door, and ended his life with a single gunshot. He was 29. When news reached Flynn, he locked himself in his room for hours. No jokes, no bravado, no grin, just silence. Some say he cried until he couldn't breathe. Others say he drank until morning. But everyone agrees, Flynn never spoke about Ross again. Not to press, not to friends, not even in his memoir. Instead, he carried Ross quietly, secretly, like a bruise on the heart no camera could capture. In that worn notebook at 50, the first name written, never crossed out, was his, Ross Alexander. The first man he couldn't save. The first man he couldn't forget. Chapter 2. David Niven, the best friend who walked away. Before lies, before bitterness hardened him, Errol Flynn had one true friend, someone who knew him before he became myth. David Niven. They met in their 20s, two young men with more charm than money, more dreams than sense. No idea how brutal Hollywood would become. They rented a Malibu house together, a wind-swept bachelor's shack above the Pacific. Studios called them wild bachelors of the beach. But behind laughter, women, parties, there was something softer, a brotherhood Hollywood never understood. David Niven was everything Flynn wasn't. Measured, gentle, disciplined, secure in ways Flynn never could be. Yet they fit perfectly, like two halves of a life neither could manage alone. Niven cooked breakfast, Flynn fixed plumbing. Niven read scripts, Flynn drank rum and played guitar until dawn. They teased, protected, built a friendship deep enough to feel like home, the only home either had in that strange, glittering world. But fame doesn't allow softness, not for long. One night, after a party, too loud, too drunk for either to remember clearly, something happened. A moment, a mistake, a boundary crossed. Sources tell it differently. Some say Flynn, intoxicated and confused, reached for Niven in ways that startled him. Others say he collapsed against his friend, seeking comfort he couldn't name. What matters, Niven pulled away, swiftly, sharply, hurt, not by desire, but by fear of what it meant in a world where rumors could destroy them both. Next morning, David Niven packed his bags and walked out of the Malibu house. He didn't slam doors, didn't curse, didn't accuse. He simply left. And Flynn stood in the doorway, watching the only real friend he ever had walk away. They remained cordial publicly, but something shattered forever, something that never healed. In his notebook, Flynn wrote Niven's name 3 times, once in careful ink, once trembling, once crossed out, then rewritten. Because some losses don't fade. Some regrets never loosen their grip. David Niven wasn't a lover, not a scandal, simply the man Flynn cared for most and pushed away without meaning to. The friend who walked away, the mistake Errol Flynn carried for life. Chapter 3. Tyrone Power, the beautiful rival and the wild knight. If Flynn was Warner Brothers' wild prince, Tyrone Power was Fox's golden god. 2 men carved from impossible beauty, 2 stars burning at impossible heights, 2 careers built on the fantasy that every woman in America wanted them. But behind publicity stills, behind tailored suits and practiced smiles, there was private tension studios never acknowledged. Because no matter how Hollywood tried to separate them, Flynn and Power were drawn to each other from the start. Their first real meeting wasn't on set, but at a lavish Beverly Hills party where champagne flowed like water and secrets traded more freely than cigarettes. Flynn was loud, flirtatious, half-drunk. Power was quieter, polished, graceful, observing with dark, thoughtful eyes. They talked for hours, not about films, not about fame, about fear. Fear of being owned by studios, fear of disappointing the world, fear of never being allowed honesty. Some say they slipped away from the party together. Some say they ended up on Flynn's yacht, the 2 most desired men in Hollywood, staring at black water, telling truths neither could say in daylight. Biographers like Hyam and Brett describe what followed as a fling, a wild, impulsive night. Studios feared but never discovered. A brief surrender to desire, loneliness, the impossible pressure of being the world's fantasy. To Power, it may have been a moment, a rebellion, a thrill, a secret burned into memory. But to Flynn, it was something else. For a man living constantly on exposure's edge, for a man who feared his own heart more than scandal, that night with Tyrone Power became a symbol of what he could have been if he hadn't been forced to hide. Yet, they never spoke of it again. Not once, not publicly, not privately. Whenever they crossed paths at premieres, Power would flash that dazzling smile, and Flynn's chest would tighten just enough for him to reach for another drink. No romance, no heartbreak, no whispered promises. Only shared understanding. 2 men carrying the same mask in the same merciless world. Years later, when Tyrone Power died suddenly at 44, Flynn received the news in silence. He poured a drink, stared at the wall, whispered something no one heard. In the notebook at 50, Tyrone Power's name was written cleanly, No smudges, no scratches, no hesitation. Because some connections, no matter how brief, leave marks that never fade. He was the beautiful rival, the wild knight Flynn never forgot, and the second name Errol Flynn whispered into darkness. Chapter 4. Cesar Romero, the Latin lover in Hollywood shadows. Before shadows tightened around Flynn's life, there was a man whose laughter could fill entire rooms, and whose secrets stayed just out of reach. Cesar Romero, Hollywood's charming rogue, tall, elegant, ever smiling. The kind of man who could dance with a woman, flirt with a man, never lose that effortless grace he was famous for. Flynn first met him not on set, but at a private party hosted by Tyrone Power. A gathering of beautiful people, beautiful lies, beautiful dangers. Romero walked in like a spotlight had chosen him. Smooth suit, perfect hair, a grin carrying promise and warning. Flynn was instantly intrigued. Not romantically, not at first. It was simpler. Recognition. Romero was one of few men in Hollywood who understood the performance of masculinity. The dance, the pose, the wink for cameras, and the exhaustion that came after. Their conversations were effortless, punctuated by Romero's bright musical laughter and Flynn's low conspiratorial smirk. They became companions of the night, not lovers in traditional senses, but partners in mischief. Two men who knew how to disappear when parties got too loud, reappear somewhere quieter, darker, where no one asked wrong questions. Rumors say they shared more than drinks, more than jokes, more than late-night confessions whispered between strangers and friends. Some say they had a handful of nights together, brief, burning, fueled by rum, dance, and the electric feeling of being seen without judgment. For Flynn, those nights weren't about romance. They were about escape, about slipping out of the costume studios forced him to wear into something closer to truth. For Romero, they were about freedom, the rare kind that could only exist in shadows, behind closed doors, where the world's expectations couldn't follow. But like all secret things in Hollywood, their connection was fleeting. Romero moved on, to other parties, other co-stars, other masks. Flynn moved deeper into himself, deeper into chaos, loneliness, walls he kept building around his heart. Yet even decades later, even in final years when memory blurred between reality and regret, Flynn still remembered the laughter. That loud, bright, fearless laughter that made him feel for a moment like he wasn't living two different lives. In the notebook at 50, Cesar Romero's name appeared halfway down. Not circled, not decorated, just a small note beside it. The man who laughed too loudly. A line that said everything about how deeply Flynn felt seen, and how deeply he feared exposure. Cesar Romero wasn't the great love of his life, but he was a flash of color in a world Flynn kept black and white. And sometimes, that's enough to haunt forever. Chapter 5. Robert Taylor, the MGM Experiment. Hollywood, in the late 1930s, was a kingdom of illusions, and every kingdom has prisoners. At MGM, that prisoner was Robert Taylor. Handsome, gentle, impeccably groomed, he was the studio's golden poster boy, the man cast as noble lovers, refined gentlemen, dreams every woman supposedly wanted. But that dream was curated, constructed, engineered by a system controlling everything: haircuts, interviews, even relationships. Taylor felt trapped. Which is why, when he met Errol Flynn, the wild, reckless opposite of his careful MGM image, something sparked. Not romance, not desire, at least not at first. It was recognition, a quiet understanding only men living inside the Hollywood machine could share. They weren't close friends, weren't rivals. They were two young actors trying to survive the same suffocating reality: be perfect or be replaced. They met at studio dinners, private parties, yacht gatherings where publicity cameras were forbidden and masks could slip slightly. Taylor admired Flynn's freedom, the swagger, defiance, refusal to bend. Flynn admired Taylor's gentleness, a softness he knew Hollywood would punish if it ever saw it. Biographer David Brett describes what happened between them as an experiment, a single, reckless moment shared during peak studio pressure, born not from passion, but exhaustion, from wanting just once to be someone other than the character the world demanded. One night, after a long party on Flynn's yacht, with rum bottles empty and stars blurred against sky, the boundary between curiosity and comfort dissolved. Two men, both trapped by public images, both desperate for something real, gave in to the one thing Hollywood never allowed: privacy. But dawn always comes, and with it, fear. Next morning, Robert Taylor panicked. In cold, sober light, what had felt like freedom now felt like danger to his reputation, contracts, identity. He left the yacht without a word. For nearly a year, he avoided Flynn at premieres, turned away at parties, insisted on walking opposite directions at studio luncheons. Flynn never confronted him, never pushed, never mentioned that night again. But the silence between them said everything. When Taylor married Barbara Stanwyck shortly after, Hollywood applauded. A perfect couple, a perfect image, a perfect lie. Flynn watched from sidelines, not heartbroken, not angry, just quiet. Because he understood, better than Taylor ever realized. In the notebook at 50, Robert Taylor's name was written small, almost hesitant, as if Flynn wasn't sure he had the right to include it. No flourish, no emotion, just two words beside the name. We were scared. Maybe that was the truth. Not love, not passion, not scandal. Just two young men in Hollywood, caught in machinery of expectation, sharing a moment neither dared speak of again. Chapter 6. Randolph Scott, Bachelor Hall's Dark Night. In Hollywood's golden age, there were places more famous in rumor than any film produced. One was Bachelor Hall, the house where Randolph Scott lived with Cary Grant. Two men, two legends, two names whispered in every studio corridor, a household wrapped in mystery, speculation, and enough charm to make even truth feel fictional. Into that world, Errol Flynn drifted often, drawn by laughter, privacy, and rare freedom that place seemed to offer. Randolph Scott was nothing like Flynn. Quiet, reserved, a cowboy with a poet's softness and gentleman's restraint. Where Flynn was volcanic, Scott was steady. Where Flynn was chaos, Scott was calm. Yet Flynn felt strangely safe around him. Nights at Bachelor Hall were legendary. Whiskey on tables, cigarette smoke curling against Art Deco walls, Cary Grant telling stories in silk robes, Scott sitting back, observing with warm, amused eyes. During one night, swollen with drink, laughter, and gentle haze blurring lines between truth and impulse, the moment happened. No one knows exactly how it began, whether it was a joke turned physical, a conversation turned intimate, or simply two men finally letting go of masks they wore too long. What is known, what has been told by those claiming to be there, is that boundaries dissolved, words softened, distance closed. In Bachelor Hall's dim glow, Errol Flynn and Randolph Scott crossed a line neither would ever acknowledge again. Cary Grant walked in, not loudly, not dramatically, just unexpectedly. He saw enough, not everything, but enough to understand the truth neither man would dare speak. Scott froze. Flynn didn't. He laughed, that sharp, nervous, too loud laugh he used whenever fear crawled up his spine. Grant said nothing, just turned away, leaving silence heavier than before. Next morning, Bachelor Hall felt colder. Scott kept his distance. Not cruelly, but cautiously, carefully, the way a man guards fragile secrets. Flynn tried pretending nothing changed, but it had. They didn't fight, didn't confess, simply drifted, two men carrying the same unspoken memory, walking opposite directions. Years later, in that worn notebook at 50, Randolph Scott's name appeared near the bottom. Beside it, in cramped handwriting, a single note. One night, enough to change everything. No elaboration, no explanation, just simple truth. Some moments don't need to last to leave permanent marks. For Flynn, that night at Bachelor Hall was a turning point, a reminder of how dangerous honesty could be in a world built entirely on lies. Randolph Scott became yet another shadow Errol Flynn carried until the end. Chapter 7. John Barrymore, the mentor and something more. Before Flynn was a star, before he was scandal, before he became the man the world thought it knew, he was a young, uncertain actor searching for someone to follow. He found that someone in John Barrymore. Barrymore wasn't just a legend. He was the legend, the greatest Shakespearean actor of his generation, a man whose name carried the weight of art itself. Flynn worshipped him. Barrymore was everything he wanted to be: witty, brilliant, fearless, capable of commanding rooms with single words or destroying them with single drinks. When they first met, Barrymore saw something in young Flynn: a raw fire, a hunger, a recklessness painfully reminiscent of himself. And so began one of the strangest, most intense relationships in Hollywood's golden age. Barrymore became Flynn's mentor, teaching him Shakespeare, teaching him timing, teaching him how to break rules with charm instead of chaos. But mentorship requires intimacy. And intimacy, between two men living behind masks, is dangerous. They spent nights together, not in passion, but in emotional nakedness Flynn had never known, drinking until dawn, reciting Shakespeare in half-lit rooms, confessing fears they'd never dare speak sober. Barrymore told Flynn the world would devour him. Flynn told Barrymore the world already had. As time passed, their bond deepened, part father and son, part teacher and disciple, part something else, something Hollywood would never understand. Some biographers insisted their relationship crossed boundaries, not in romance, but in vulnerability, in dangerous space between admiration and longing, between power and surrender. Whatever the truth, it carved itself deeply into Flynn's heart. When Barrymore's health collapsed under alcohol and regret's weight, Flynn was one of few who stayed. He visited in quiet moments, helped him walk, listened to ramblings, held up fragments of a man who once held the world in his hands. When Barrymore died in 1942, ragged, lonely, fading, Flynn was devastated. A mentor, a mirror, a ghost. Flynn never filled that void again, never tried. Decades later, when he opened the notebook at 50, John Barrymore's name appeared differently from others. Not crossed out, not rewritten, not hesitant, but framed, boxed carefully, as if Flynn couldn't bear the thought of losing that name to time or memory. A single annotation sat beside it. He taught me everything, including what to fear. John Barrymore wasn't a scandal in Flynn's life. He was a wound, a compass, a warning, and perhaps the closest thing Flynn ever had to unconditional understanding. That's why Barrymore's name was the only one Flynn could never bring himself to erase. Chapter 8. Clark Gable, the rival who became a rumor. If Errol Flynn was Hollywood's outlaw prince, then Clark Gable was its iron-fisted king, the king of Hollywood, the man whose smirk could silence rooms, whose presence could intimidate even studio heads. He was rugged where Flynn was wild, controlled where Flynn was chaotic, powerful in ways Flynn secretly envied. The public adored the idea they were rivals, two titans of masculinity, two legends fighting for same roles, same headlines, same women. But behind closed doors, far from camera flashes, there was something else. Flynn admired Gable, not just his strength, but his discipline, the way he carried himself, like a man who had seen hell and refused to bow to it. Gable in turn saw in Flynn a younger version of himself, a beautiful disaster he couldn't decide whether to warn or destroy. They weren't friends, not exactly, but they circled each other, at parties, on studio lots, in smoky back rooms where real Hollywood lived. Sometimes they drank together. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they said nothing and let tension speak for them. Then came the rumor. It started with Scotty Bowers, the infamous fixer of Hollywood desires, a man who arranged private encounters for the biggest stars. He claimed that one night, Gable and Flynn were part of a party of three, a night that blurred into memory like spilled bourbon, a night studios would have burned film reels to erase had they known it happened. Was it true? Maybe, maybe not. In Hollywood, rumors carry more weight than facts. And sometimes, rumors are simply truths spoken in the wrong era. What is known is the way Flynn reacted whenever Gable's name was mentioned. His jaw tightened, his eyes lowered. He reached for a drink he didn't need. Not fear, not shame, recognition. Because Clark Gable was the only man in Hollywood who understood exactly what it cost to be the symbol of masculinity for an entire nation. He carried his own secrets, his own shadows, his own grief, the kind that turns a man into a monument and a prisoner simultaneously. Maybe that's why Flynn wrote his name in the notebook, not because of what happened, but because of what almost did. In the notebook, Errol Flynn opened at 50. Clark Gable's name sat at the very end, as if Flynn had saved the hardest truth for last. Beside it, only one sentence. We were two alike. Not a confession, not an admission, just an acknowledgement from one broken icon to another. Clark Gable was never a lover, never a moment, never a night etched in memory. He was something deeper. The shadow Flynn saw every time he looked in mirrors. The reminder of what he had become and what he feared most to be. So Gable became the final name, the last ghost, in a list Flynn carried through decades of fame, chaos, and silence. The climax. Vancouver. By the time he turned 50, Errol Flynn was a ghost wearing a legend's face. His heart was failing, his liver swollen. His beauty, once the envy of every man in Hollywood, had become a haunted shadow of the boy he once was. He had outlived his youth, outlived his fame, outlived almost every version of himself, except the one he feared most. October 14th, 1959, Vancouver, British Columbia. Flynn checked into a small waterfront residence, a quiet cabin meant for rest before a business trip. But rest was impossible. The pain in his chest was sharp, relentless. His hands trembled even when still. That night, rain came in sheets, hammering against windows like impatient fingers demanding entry. The harbor groaned with shifting tides. In that lonely room, Flynn reached into his suitcase and pulled out a battered leather notebook. The notebook, the one he'd carried for decades, the one filled with names he could never speak aloud. He set it on the table, stared at it, poured himself a drink, though doctors had begged him to stop. Then, with a breath that shook his entire body, he opened it. 8 names, 8 men, 8 ghosts. Ross Alexander, David Niven, Tyrone Power, Cesar Romero, Robert Taylor, Randolph Scott, John Barrymore, Clark Gable. Names that had lived in silence longer than some of the men themselves. His friend, George Caldo, found him hunched over the table, pale, sweating, breathing in short, fractured gasps. "Errol," he whispered, "you need to lie down." But Flynn didn't move. He pressed his fingers to the page as if trying to steady memories, steady truth, steady himself. Then, in a voice thin as rain outside, he whispered, "These were the men I loved, in one way or another." George froze. The room froze. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. Flynn wasn't confessing out of guilt, but out of exhaustion, out of relief, out of desperate desire to let go of the burden he'd carried alone for half a lifetime. He closed the notebook gently, almost tenderly, like a man putting a child to sleep. With one final exhale, he leaned back in his chair, a sailor surrendering to the tide. Hours later, Errol Flynn was gone. No cameras, no scandals, no masks. Only a man, and the truth he had finally allowed himself to speak. The truth that had followed him through fame, through chaos, through desire and regret, all the way to a quiet, rain-soaked night in Vancouver. The ending. When Errol Flynn died, Hollywood rushed to rewrite his story. They remembered the pirate, the adventurer, the laughing outlaw with a sword in his hand and a woman on his arm. They remembered scandals, trials, headlines that tried to define him, but they never remembered the man who lived between shadows, the man who hid entire chapters of his heart because the world wouldn't allow him to speak them, the man who ran, not from fame, but from the truth he was terrified to embrace. Hollywood creates legends, but it also buries people. It buries softness. It buries fear. It buries the quiet moments in darkness when masks crack and the real person underneath finally breathes. Errol Flynn spent a lifetime trying to be the man they wanted him to be, and only one night, one rain-soaked night in Vancouver, as his heart failed and the world grew silent, did he finally let himself become the man he truly was. His notebook has never been found. If it still exists, no one has seen it. No one has dared to claim it. But the truth it held, the truth he whispered, lingers like a ghost. 8 names, 8 stories, 8 secrets buried beneath Hollywood's golden age glitter. And now, we're left with a single, simple question. If Errol Flynn had been born today, would those names still need to be a secret? He never said them publicly. But at 50, Errol Flynn finally stopped running from them.